Judge Perry also slapped her with a $1,000 fine for each count.
As a result of those 4 separate and distinct lies, law enforcement expended a great deal of time, energy, and manpower looking for young Caylee Marie Anthony.
And after sentencing, the court announced Casey's release date.
At this time, I'd like to announce that the defendant was given credit for 1,043 days, and at this time, her release date has been calculated as July 13th, 2011.
And there you have it, just 6 more days behind bars for Caylee Anthony. And joining me now with reaction, defense attorney Robert Shapiro, Fox News legal analyst host Kimberly Guilfoyle. By the way, you can see her on the upcoming show right here on the Fox News channel, The 5, starting next week. Bob, by the way, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. And I know you haven't done interviews on this yet, and we appreciate you being here. You wrote a column, and you were kind enough to share it with me. Why was Caylee Anthony found not guilty? I think there's a lot of insight in this, and I want to give you a chance to explain it.
Well, what I said, Sean, was what a lot of the people are saying now, and that's in hindsight, and that is that the prosecution overcharged this case. When they charged first-degree murder as a capital murder for the death penalty, they made a promise to the jury, and they said, we think that we are going to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Caylee Anthony is guilty of murder in the first degree and that she should be executed as a result. They failed to deliver on that promise. And in hindsight, they made it clear that they knew they couldn't deliver on that promise when the state's attorney said, we have a dead bones case, and it's going to be very, very, very difficult to prove. We know that. The first thing a lawyer is going to look at, and Kimberly will tell you this from her years of prosecuting cases, is they look at the autopsy report, they go to the last page, and they look at the coroner's conclusion. And in this case, it was homicide by unknown means. Yeah. Those things are mutually exclusive.
You know, I watched juror number 3, who gave an interview, Kimberly, to ABC News.
Yes.
And every argument that I made to you last night, including what Bob Shapiro just said, that they overcharged, she made. And that is, if I don't know how this person died, how am I going to sentence her when we don't know how she died? And look, the jury, they didn't need a lot of time. They were all in agreement here, as was the alternate juror. And so you still are furious at the verdict here?
I'm not furious. I'm just telling you, based on my years of experience as a prosecutor and evaluating crime scenes and evidence and reviewing autopsy results, I don't disagree with what Bob Shapiro has said. He's exactly right. It isn't inconsistent with what I said last night on your program.
In a very passionate way.
Nevertheless, I'm passionate about justice, and I'm extremely passionate when children are murdered, and I feel the person responsible is getting a pass and will walk out the door next Wednesday. The prosecutors made it almost insurmountable for them by charging this as a death penalty and trying to drive home the first degree when they didn't have a specific cause of death that the medical examiner put down on the form. Now, the reason why the medical examiner couldn't give you that specific cause of death was because this little girl's body was dumped in a garbage bag and left for 5 months, so there was just skeletal remains.
Bob, I was using the analogy that right from the beginning, the 31 days, it's beyond odd that a mother wouldn't report her missing child. Her lies, well documented, she was convicted on the lies. But we have this burden, we have these protections for citizens, and that is, you know, the presumption of innocence before you're proven guilty, that burden being on the prosecution. That means something to me. They didn't meet that burden as an observer of this case.
Well, Sean, I agree with you. Look, I think any reasonable person would conclude that the most likely occurrence in this case was that Caylee Anthony is responsible for the death of her child. I don't think any reasonable person would disagree with that. But we had two trials in this case. We had a trial in the media, and we had a trial in the courtroom. Each one had different rules. In the courtroom, there was rules of evidence, what was admissible, and jury instructions where 12 people were charged to deliberate. And they were not allowed to form any opinions until all the evidence was in. In the court of public opinion, there was no such restriction. In fact, people formed opinions before any evidence was even taken. And they became very passionate, and understandably so in a case like this. But my real question to people who think this verdict was wrong and they're outraged by it is this: would you sleep comfortably every single night convicting Caylee Anthony of first-degree murder and executing her, knowing you made the right decision?
I think this juror made that very point. And the juror said that she could not do that, could not sleep at night, for the very reasons that they did not prove the case to the standard that is. But
he said, "How could you punish someone if you don't even know exactly what they did or how they did it?"
Last night you were so angry at this verdict.
Listen, because let me tell you something. Circumstantial evidence in this case points really to one conclusion, Sean. I'm sorry. If a little child drowns, you don't duct tape over their mouth.
How do you know Caylee did it?
I'm just telling you. Listen to me on this. She's the last person with the child. She puts herself at the scene, not the meter reader, not anybody else. So you want to try and blame it on her father and say that the father murdered the child? There is no evidence to suggest whatsoever that this little girl died. Excuse me. And
connect her to this
theory, I'm doing it right now.
I'm listening.
Yeah.
I don't hear it.
Well, listen a little bit more. You'll hear. The bottom line is she's the last one with the child. And how many years pass before she comes up with this story, which, by the way, coincidentally, matches a story from another inmate about a child drowning and the grandfather finding it.
Right.
Why do you have the duct tape over the mouth, Sean?
Rather than you and I
Why do you have the searches for chloroform? I'm just asking you. And if you think it's negligent, then why wasn't she convicted of that?
I'm going to let the great Bob Shapiro have a rebuttal here. Bob.
Well, you know, I can't disagree totally with either of you. I can understand Kimberly's point, and I think that the circumstantial evidence is very, very strong in this case. On the other hand, I can see where the forensic evidence was greatly flawed, where the prosecution was greatly impeached, and some of the science that was admitted had never been admitted in a courtroom before.
True.
Analyzing air was something unheard of. Even, Kimberly, even the prosecution in the closing argument said, we have two different views of the forensic evidence, and the jury is entitled to pick which one they think they want to rely upon.
You're
and
absolutely
it's nearly impossible.
right, Bob. And DNA had its first day in court as well. So maybe this evidence came too soon, and it's difficult for everyone to understand. It doesn't mean that later it won't prove to be scientifically reliable and something that is readily accepted in court. Obviously, that day wasn't in the Caylee Anthony
Bob,
trial.
last word. We got a break.
I agree with you totally, but Kimberly, I don't think you would have voted for the death penalty or first-degree murder in this case if you were on the jury.
Okay, and you know what? Fair enough. I wouldn't have charged it. I wouldn't have sought the death penalty in this case because I understand human beings and emotion and juries and how to pick them and what you ask them to do when they put their head on the pillow at the end of the night. Would I say that they would have an abiding conviction of the truth of the charge enough to take this woman's life? No. But let me tell you, if you believe in your heart that she's responsible and based on the circumstantial evidence for taking the life of her child, that she's the one that had the motive, that she's the last one with her, right? Then you could say if she gave her some chloroform, even a little bit, one time and she died, that is felony murder based on aggravated child abuse, and she is guilty of that crime, which could have a life top.
All right. Good to see you both.
Sean, thank you so much for at least having an educated and intellectual discussion. I greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate you getting Kimberly from beating me up from last night. Thanks for saving me.
Wait till the commercial break, Sean.
Thank you both for being with us. Coming up, the